going on the screen. But open up to Mark chapter 2, and we're going to get going right here this morning. I want to give a quick update for everyone just with what's going on at Momentum. Originally, when we first went into doing church strictly online, we had hoped that we would all be able to get back together starting next week on Easter Sunday. But as things went on, we had a feeling that our needing to meet strictly online like this would be extended. And this last week, that became a reality for us when Governor DeWine extended the shelter-in-place order until May 1st. So we are going to continue to meet like this until we can't or are told otherwise. We will at least be meeting only online until May 1st. But I'm not going to lie, all the challenges, this brings some new challenges that we've got to figure out. But I'm actually, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit this morning, I'm actually kind of excited for the opportunities that this disruption to what has become our routine brings. Now, one of the things that had become, it's a yearly routine, but my youngest daughter, Berkeley, she turned 3 this week. Happy birthday, baby girl, if you're listening at home. She turned 3. And since we've been stuck at home, right, we really wanted to do something to make this birthday extra special for her. Kids, students that are at home, man, we feel for you guys that are having birthdays and not able to have birthday parties and celebrate with your friends. We hate that for you. Your parents, your guardians feel that more deeply than we can convey. But we're excited for you. Parents, guardians, friends, keep doing awesome things. I see people posting things like drive-by celebrations, clapping and cheering, singing happy birthday. Keep that up. We feel for you needing to have birthdays at home. But Berkeley, she turned 3 this week, and one of my wife and I's favorite things about Berkeley is that she just seems to have this natural understanding for comedic timing. It's one thing to know a good joke, but it's another thing to be able to tell it well. It's another thing to understand timing and when's the right time to take the pressure out of the room by doing something funny. And for a while now, Abby and I, my wife and I, we really couldn't figure out when this started. But she just seems to have this knack for making you laugh by doing something or saying something off the cuff at just the right moment. And I think a lot of it, as I started to think through where this came from, I think a lot of it comes from her willingness, as much as often young kids are, her willingness to say out loud exactly what she's thinking the moments that she's thinking it. If you've ever worked with little kids, most are really good at this. So here's a good example. Before all this coronavirus stuff started happening, I would get up really early in the morning, and then I would go and work out before anyone else was up, and I would go early so that I could get back and help get the kids ready, so that my wife, she works at the local high school, and so that she could get out the door and get to her job, and then I would take care of the kids as they, as we get through the routine. Now, confessions with Curtis, because I would get up early in the morning, I often would not brush my teeth before I would head to the gym. And super true confessions, I'm about 50-50 for getting deodorant on before I go to the gym. Anyone who's watching right now that goes and works out with me at the gym, I'm sorry. I would feel weird about telling you that, except I don't. So there's that. I hope we get to see each other and work out again soon with or without deodorant on. I don't know. Anyway, so I get up early and I go to the gym and I get home, and lately Berkeley, who's always been our best sleeper, she's been the first one up for the day. And so I got home and she was down in the kitchen, and I was like, Berkeley, hey, I was excited to see her. Berkeley, hey, baby girl, come here, and I went in to give her a hug, and I hugged her, and I hadn't changed out of my gym clothes yet, and she pulled back immediately, and she made kind of this face at me, right? She's like, she's just like, which is odd that she pulled back from me immediately like that, because she's super physical touch as her love language, and so it was odd, and she pulled back and she said, Dad, why you all sweaty? I said, well, I was just working out at the gym. My shirt was soaked. I didn't think much about it. And so she made that face that went along, and I laughed. And I told her it was because I was working out. So can I give you a hug? And she just made this face and sheepishly shook her head no. And so I squatted down, and so I was like within arm's reach of her, and I smiled because like I get it. My shirt's soaked. It's kind of gross. And I said, well, can I give you a kiss then? To which she really pulled back and she said, maybe after you brush your teeth. Okay, I get it, sweetheart. Kids often, they don't hesitate to say exactly what they're thinking. And if you've ever been around kids, if you've ever taken a kid to the bathroom, or if you've ever been in the bathroom when someone else has taken their kids to the bathroom, they are going to say out loud everything that they're thinking, everything that they question in that moment. Immediately when they walk in the bathroom, man, something stinks in here, Hey, Dad, what are you doing? Hey, what's the person in the stall next to us doing? Daddy, why is his pants down? Dad, do you think that person next to us is pooping? It's just everything. They just wonder everything out loud. And honestly, like, this disrupts our routines. It's funny because it catches us off guard and it throws us out of what is expected. And I can't, honestly, the bathroom stuff, I can't ever help but think about what it does to the person next to us, like in the next stall over. And it's just comical to think about the way that children are willing to honestly say what's going on, and how it's funny because it just wasn't expected. Now, Jesus, man, he was a great teacher, and he was able to bring hope because Jesus was able to roll outside of the routine. Jesus was able to roll with disruptions. And a lot of times Jesus would himself kind of introduce disruptions with the way he would honestly talk about things. And so something I want you to know this morning, whether this is the first time you've signed in to mochurch.tv, this is the first time you've been at church in a long time, and we are glad you're here, you're in the right place, or whether this is the 100th time that you have signed in, Jesus' mission, I want you to know this, Jesus' mission is to bring us life. Right, one time in John 10:10, Jesus was teaching, and he's using this metaphor of a shepherd and the way he's like a shepherd protecting the sheep, the people that follow him. And Jesus says this, he says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I have come that they may have life, and that they may have it to the full. Now, the really cool thing about the way that he says that, the way he ends there, when he says that phrase that gets translated, may have it to the full, his point is I've come to give you life, but that you would have a full life. And this idea of full life is more than expected. That's what the original word means. Is that it's overabundance, like more than you ever thought you would find. You see, Jesus comes to give us eternal life, or like a someday with God sort of deal, but Jesus also wants to help us find life now. He's saying that we can experience his kingdom, his freedom, his life, this overabundance life right now. Yeah, sure, he deals with our sin on this eternal level so we can someday spend eternity with God, but he wants us to find freedom from sin now. Freedom from an addiction now. He wants to help you find purpose in place of your aimlessness. He wants you to find peace in place of your anxiety. He wants you to help you and your spouse have the full marriage, help marriage be as amazing as it was meant to be. He wants to pass on wisdom for how we use our finances so that we can be generous to other people. He wants us to parent with purpose. He wants us to work with passion. I mean, to put it in kind of shorthand, Jesus wants to help you win. He wants to help you win spiritually, like on an eternal level, but he also wants to help you win now. And the story that we see over and over and over again in the Bible is Jesus going around and finding people who looked nothing like him, right? Nothing like, didn't act like him, didn't even think that someone like Jesus, a religious teacher, a religious person, would even like him, and he likes them. And he invites them to come and live life alongside of him. And as they do, they find life. And they find it in even more ways than they ever thought they would ever find. Jesus came to bring us life. But in order to find that life, Jesus would stretch them outside of their comfort zone, right? He would challenge them, and he would interrupt their routines. He would interject some disruptions, and he would deal with disruptions and treat them as opportunities. And then a great example of this is in Mark chapter 2, that our story that we're going to look at today. And I don't want you to miss why this was written. Right? This book that we're looking at that's in our Bibles now today, the book of Mark, I don't want you to just read this story as something that's in the Bible. The reason, how this book was originally written, it was written by a guy named John Mark. That's why we call it Mark. But John Mark was a scribe for a guy named Peter. And Peter, because of what we know about him in history, Peter was most likely illiterate. But he was one of the closest and arguably probably the closest friend of Jesus. He experienced the full measure of Jesus' forgiveness, and Peter finds life. And towards the end of Peter's life, what most likely happened was John Mark goes to Peter and he says, "Hey man, you've told me these stories 1,000 times about how you experienced life with Jesus. But would you tell me just one more time? Because we've got to write these things down so that we can pass them on so other people can find and experience life that Jesus came to bring us. So, Peter, would you tell me just one more time?" And John Mark writes them down. And so now we have the life of Jesus as remembered by a guy named Peter who lived it with him. And in Mark chapter 2, Peter retells the day that Peter met a guy named Levi, who would eventually be called Matthew. And the story starts in verse 13 and goes like this. Once again, Jesus went outside to the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. Jesus began to teach them. And a couple things that we need to note here is where it says, once again. Now, we're really early in the book of Mark, but it's obvious that Jesus has been doing this for a little bit now. We don't really know how long, but it had become a routine for him that he would write that once again Jesus goes out to teach at the lake. And a large crowd comes to listen to Jesus. Now, Jesus had already done several different miracles at this point in time, and that definitely attracted crowds. But Jesus had a way of teaching that was outside, that was unordinary, right? It was unorthodox. It was different than what was customary. It's noted in the chapter before, in Mark chapter 1, they said of Jesus that Jesus taught as one having authority, not as the other teachers of the law. So Jesus doing these miracles definitely attracted people, but so did Jesus' teaching style, to the point where large crowds of people wanted to get together to hear Jesus teach. And the reason is, I think, because people were finding life in his teachings. And so Jesus once again goes out to the lake. He begins teaching. Verse 14 says, as he walked along, so maybe he's walking along the beach, maybe he's walking along a boardwalk out to the lake shore, I don't know. It says, as he walked along, he, Jesus, saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, Jesus told him, and Levi got up and followed him. Levi got up and followed Jesus. Now, eventually, Levi is called Matthew. And what that's significant, because what was most likely going on is that Matthew, or Levi, is his Hebrew name, and Matthew is his Roman or Christian name once he becomes a follower of Jesus, or once, in a Roman world. Now, it's significant because it spells out to us who Levi is. He is most likely from the Jewish tribe of Levi, meaning he would have been a devout Jew, and family heritage is a big deal. And at this time in history that we're reading this, and this geographical location is a Roman-controlled province. And what that means is that the Roman authorities would appoint natives to collect taxes and then send them off to Rome. And the way that they would make money is they would decide what they wanted to charge over and above the Roman authorities. And essentially what they're doing is stealing from their own people. So Matthew, or Levi, in this is selling out his own people for his own personal gain. Right? He's definitely seen as a sellout, and so he's not liked. I mean, this would kind of be like having someone here, right, who's grown up in Cleveland, their parents have grown up in Cleveland, their family lives in Cleveland, and then just all of a sudden one day deciding, you know what? I'm going to be a Steelers fan from now on. Home team's just not cutting it for me, Renee, I know you're signed in right now, and you're probably a little offended by that, but we just got to roll with it. That's what this was like. You're kind of like a Matthew, I don't. Now, it's kind of a fun way to look at it, but I mean, the hatred and the disdain that would run around for Levi, for Matthew here, would actually run extremely deep. And so with social stigma that runs deeper than I can really convey, Jesus with his band of followers, these devout Jews, walks up to Levi, walks up to Matthew and says, "Follow me." And Levi follows him. Now, this was customary, right? This was common for a teacher or for a rabbi to do in this time, to invite people in to his inner circle to learn from him. And Levi had likely heard of Jesus. He probably had seen Jesus do a couple of miracles. He probably kind of learned some of his teachings and been interested in Jesus for a while. Now, I've heard ministers use this section of Scripture to talk, man, look how much great his faith is, that he just up and follows Jesus just kind of blindly. And that probably didn't happen. The faith aspect is certainly there. One historian talks about how unlikely it would be for Matthew to ever go back to being a tax collector again once he leaves it. So there's still great faith. But most likely, Matthew has been overhearing Jesus for a while. And one historian talks, and this is where I fall, that perhaps this is where Matthew sees an opportunity to begin redeeming his family name for selling out his own people. He sees a second chance at finding life. And so he gets up and he follows Jesus. Now, what's really important to know is there are a couple different people who are present when Jesus makes this offer, makes this invite to Levi to follow him. One person who's already in Jesus' crew is Peter, the guy retelling this story for us. And something we need to know about Peter is a devout Jew. And so Jesus inviting this Roman tax collector to come also be part of his crew would have put Peter on his heels, like, whoa, wait, I don't know that I signed up for all this, Jesus. Another group of people that are there is this group of people called the Pharisees. And the Pharisees is a strict set of Judaism that were bent on observing all the religious laws religiously. And so at this time, the Jews that Jesus is speaking to, they had this thing called being ceremonially clean and unclean. And it was a big deal. Like, it's not end of the world sort of deal, but it was a big deal to be unclean. It would be a big deal to stay ceremonially clean, and one of the ways that you stay ceremonially clean is you wouldn't associate with someone like a Roman tax collector or sinners. And that's important to know for what happens next, because in verse 15, this is what shakes out. So while Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, at Matthew's house, it says many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. This is where I wish we could have Peter's parenthetical notations, have his thought process of what was going on while he was in Levi's house eating with him. See, Matthew, he a Roman tax collector. Peter's not going to want to even hang out, associate with this guy. And now Jesus goes over his house. Matthew agrees to follow Jesus, and the day finishes out. We don't really know what else takes place. He finishes his teachings. Maybe Jesus finishes running his clothes to the dry cleaner. I don't know. He finishes his errands, whatever he's doing for the day. And then Jesus is like, all right, what are we going to do now, guys? And Matthew, who's most likely wealthy because he's been robbing from his own people for his own gain, Matthew seemingly says, you guys can come to my house. And so Jesus is like, all right, Peter, make haste, let's go, and they all go over to Matthew's house, and Matthew invites a bunch of his friends over. Now, we know that it would have been a big deal for Peter to go into Levi's house, because later in Peter's story, in Acts chapter 10, a really interesting story in the Bible, Peter talks about a time where he goes in to someone who would be ceremonially unclean, his house. And Peter, so we know this is a big deal for Peter. And in this moment, Peter's got to be going, Jesus, what are you doing? We can't go to his house. What is happening? And so I hope I've built the tension enough for you to show how this scene is unfolding. You've got Jesus, who's talked about as this great religious, devout Jew, and he's invited a Roman tax collector to be part of his crew. And then Matthew, the despised guy, invites everyone over, including his friends, and they're all hanging out, and Peter's got to be like, what is happening right now? Like, I can't even believe that I'm about to do this. And so this entire motley crew goes into Matthew's house. They begin to have dinner, and this is what happens. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, the strict, like they're bent on observing strictly the Jewish law, were Pharisees, saw him, Jesus, eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked Jesus' disciples, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? Because this is a big deal. What is he doing? This isn't the way it's supposed to go. This isn't routine. This isn't how you're supposed to make this happen. I picture the teachers, like the Pharisees right here, kind of over in a corner, begin to whisper and murmur to other students of Jesus. And the question makes its way through the crowd to where eventually Jesus overhears the question, what the teachers were asking. And this is what happens next. In verse 17, Jesus says, or it says, on hearing this, Jesus said to them, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. And so the way I like to picture all this, could you imagine, wait, just for a second, just imagine this unfolding with me. Jesus, in Matthew's home, takes a break from whatever he's talking about, whatever he's eating, whatever he's teaching about, and he says, all right, I tell you what, those guys outside that are asking the question, you tell them, or perhaps maybe they're in earshot, maybe they're sitting outside on the deck or something, you go tell them, or maybe they overhear it, it's not the healthy that need a doctor, but the sick. I like to picture Matthew being the one that Jesus has go deliver the message to the Pharisees. Because Matthew comes in and he's like, okay, hey, Jesus, they want to know why you're eating with tax collectors and sinners. And Jesus goes, okay, Matthew, you know what? Matthew, you go tell them. It's not the healthy that need the doctor, but the sick. And so Matthew's like, okay, not the healthy, but okay. Hey, Jesus, are you saying I'm sick? To which I think, right, and maybe some like Berkeley 3-year-old honesty, Jesus would say, yeah, Matthew, you're sick. Come on, like you're selling out your own people for your own financial gain. You know you need some help. I think you feel that. I think Jesus would say, Matthew, I think you feel that. I think you've probably felt that for a long time. But Matthew, don't worry. You stick with me, you follow me, and I will lead you to life. I will help you find life. You see, really what happens in just this one story in Mark chapter 2 is Jesus disrupts everyone's routine to challenge them to think differently. He says, Matthew, you need help to not take advantage of your own people. You've got to start thinking about this differently. Peter, you need help to broaden how you go about loving people. You've got to start thinking differently. Pharisees, you need to broaden who you love. It's Jesus saying over and over and over. And when you read the story of Jesus, it's over and over and over of Jesus saying, you guys have got to start thinking about this differently. And then when I think about disruption, right, because I've been thinking just a ton about disruptions recently, mainly because I am a guy that thrives in routine. I think most people probably do, and just everything is disrupted right now. And then there's just such a lack of clarity of what's, really going to be next. And I recognize, man, Jesus himself was so often interrupted while he was doing ministry. Right, just a couple stories. One time while teaching, there's a group of guys that wanted to get their friend to Jesus so bad. They go up on the roof in a house. Jesus is teaching inside the house, and they dig a hole in the roof so that they can get their friend to Jesus. One time while traveling to go heal a sick kid, a woman pushes through the crowd to get to Jesus and touch him so that she can be healed. Another time while teaching, kids want to run up and tackle and wrestle Jesus, and Jesus' own students try to hold the kids back, but Jesus encourages them to let the kids come. Let the kids come, be a part. Let them disrupt me. And I couldn't help but notice that Jesus disrupts, and he uses disruption. And every time, it's like that Jesus sees the disruption actually as an opportunity. And I've felt like Peter a ton, like Peter in this story recently, just because I just can't help but focus on all the things we can't do that we would normally be doing this time of year. I go out for walks in my neighborhoods, and my neighbors who I love to see got to stand across the street. We can't even stand face to face and have a conversation. I miss baseball. We were supposed to have opening day already and well into the routine of the season, and it's interrupted. I miss our egg hunt as a church where we have kids from the community and we go out and we just have fun and we take fun pictures with the Easter Bunny up here. I miss the idea of us being able to get together face to face on Easter as a church body, see each other, high five, laugh together, see new faces, and celebrate the stories of people that you've been praying about and inviting for years. And they finally would show up. I miss the fact that we're not going to be able, or it doesn't feel like we're able to do that. And one of the things that I feel like Jesus is really trying to say to us right now through this story is you've got to start thinking about this differently. Right? Take this disruption and stop looking at what you can't do and start seeing what you can do. Try something new that stretches you a little bit. I think he's saying, guys, we've got to start thinking about this differently. And so I realized something else this week. There's been a lot of self-realization going on in the Teal household this week. I started thinking about this through the vein of, man, we've got to approach this differently, stop thinking about what we can't do and start thinking about what we can do. And I realized, a problem we've had over the last several years on Easter Sunday specifically? We've had an issue of having enough seats to accommodate all who want to join and hang out with us on Easter. Every year, this building packs out for our 9:30 and 11 o'clock services. We got people sitting out in the alcove and down the ramp, and same thing at our Garfield Heights campus. But you know what issue we're not going to have this year on Easter? Yeah. You needing to sit in each other's laps just to be able to be in the room and get together. Right? You don't have to worry about inviting your friends to come hear the good news that Jesus brings life and wondering about whether or not you'll be able to sit together once you get in here. We literally can reach anyone who has the internet. How can we start using our digital influence to help people find life in Jesus? And so I really want to challenge you to start thinking creatively. Right? Stretch yourself. Do something that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, to use your digital influence to invite people to come hear the story of Jesus bringing us life. And if you're not able to sign in and join us live next week on Easter Sunday at 10:30, you know what you can do? You could host a watch party later that night on Facebook. Say, hey, late 6 p.m. tonight, I'm going to be watching the service from my church this morning. I would love for you to come watch with me, and you guys can interact and watch the service together. You could host a watch party. You could have a Zoom call with your family. Right? You could set up a Zoom call where your family could all call in together and all of you watch mochurch.tv together so that you can hear the good news of how Jesus brings life. And we could celebrate Easter together as a church. Now, in the spirit of thinking about what we can do in place of and things that we can't, one of the things that we would do every year is we'd print this poster that would say, hey, join me Easter Sunday, at one of our, 2 campuses and the times, and we'd have you take a picture and post that to social media. Well, this year, we're not doing that. But what I want to do is I want to challenge you to post a selfie video of yourself inviting people to watch mochurch.tv, or inviting them to come to church with you virtually, digitally, and so that they can hear that Jesus brings life. I'm even going to give you a script, and you don't have to say this, but it's something that's simple and quick, just a short video that says, hey, look, I'm not perfect, right? And if you know me, you know, like, I'm not even close, but I am finding life as I follow and live out Jesus' teachings in my life. I want you to find that life as well. Would you join me next Sunday at mochurch.tv? I want to challenge you. Let's stretch ourselves creatively and think, how can we help bring the news that Jesus brings life? Also this week, in the spirit of I want to do things that stretch ourselves outside of our creative, outside of our normal routines, this week I'm going to do something that makes me really uncomfortable, and I'm going to go live from my Facebook page and our Momentum Twinsburg, Macedonia, and our main campus page. I'm going to go live just for anyone to come in and drop a comment in the comment box of something they want to pray for. And I'm going to pray for them publicly live, because I'm just tired of thinking about what I can't do and ready to start doing things that I can. And for those that don't have Facebook, we're also going to do a Zoom call, but we've got to have a password and stuff for that. And so if you're interested for that and don't have Facebook, you can email Rachel at momentumchurch.com, and she will get you the information that you need. And to be honest with you, I have no idea how it's going to go. And it makes me extremely uncomfortable. But I think that it's time that we start thinking differently, trying something new and maybe a little uncomfortable, so that we can help people know that Jesus came to bring us life. Something else happened this week. I have seen a ton of social media posts every day around 2 o'clock using the hashtag WineWithDwine. And I realize I'm checking in every single day. I'm signing in to hear Wine with DeWine, or I'm going and I'm reading the notes afterwards. And I realize that I sign in and I listen because I'm looking for some hope. Right? I sign in and I listen to these words that DeWine is saying, hoping that maybe he's going to give me some good news. Hoping that maybe we're flattening the curve. Hoping that maybe that curve is starting to go down and things can get back to normal. Every day we're signing in hoping that he'll give us some good news, and every day it just seems like things are getting worse. And one day I said that to my wife, Abby, and she looked back at me and she said, wouldn't it be awesome if we could create a hashtag that would get this many people to sign in to hear some actual good news? That Jesus brings life. Meaning to sign in to church and so they could hear the good news that Jesus came to bring life. Look, how can we take this disruption and use it as an opportunity to love, to pray for, and invite people to hear that Jesus came to bring life?